Kitase woke up to find the elf wife from his dreams actually sleeping beside him. Since childhood, Kitase had a unique ability. His dreams would take him to a world of swords and magic. His nightly dreams continued seamlessly, as if he really traveled to another world when he slept. After waking up in this alternate world at 7 a.m., Kitase continued exploring the forest. If he were killed by a monster there, he'd just wake up in the real world. Death wasn't a concern. Time flowed differently between the two worlds. The 25-year-old Kitase was a corporate drone in the real world, but a teenager in the alternate world. There, he had met a companion, the fairy Mary. However, since moving to the Magician's Guild, Mary had been very busy. Today, having some free time, Kitase invited her to explore nearby ruins. Mary initially sulked, questioning why their rare outing had to be to ruins. Kitase patted his backpack, suggesting they could have a picnic. Persuaded by the promise of food, Mary agreed. The ruins were from an underground city that suddenly perished a millennium ago, preserved almost intact without any signs of conflict, making it one of the region's 7 wonders. Kitase was particularly fascinated by these mysteries, though solving them wasn't imperative, especially with Mary's company. His casual remark struck a chord with Mary, and together, they entered the ruins. Mary tapped the ground with her wand, illuminating the sprites in the air. They found a clear space in the hall, perfect for lunch. Excited at the mention of food, Mary eagerly opened the lunchbox Kitase had prepared. The meal was full of novel delicacies she had never tried before, like tofu skin and kanto stew made with spring vegetables. As Mary ate, she wondered about Kitase's origins, curious how he knew dishes she had never seen. Kitase told her he was from a country called Japan, likely unfindable on any map here. He offered to hang out again if Mary enjoyed his company. Mary, playing hard to get, claimed she was too busy, but admitted occasionally visiting Kitase wouldn't be a problem. After eating, they resumed exploring the ruins and soon encountered a monster. Kitase rushed towards it only to high-five the lizard man. It turned out they were old acquaintances. Kitase even spoke the monster's language, which Mary couldn't understand. He shared information received from his lizardman friend about a dragon in the depths entering its breeding season, advising caution. Nevertheless, Kitase wanted to see the dragon eggs, knowing he couldn't die here. They reached the edge of the level, staring into the dark abyss. Mary cast a spell on Kitase's eyes, allowing him to see the sleeping dragon below. The dragon's markings suddenly glowed, and Mary clung to Kitase's arm, their bodies touching closely. Kitase wasn't interested in Mary's explanations, but their conversation woke the dragon. As Kitase suggested retreating the way they came, a metal door suddenly slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. The dragon emerged from the abyss, and Kitase and Mary clung together, thinking they would die soon, regretting not seeing the eggs. After dying in the alternate world, Kitase would typically wake up in the real world. However, this time when he awoke, he found a beautiful girl, his companion Mary, lying beside him. Overwhelmed, Kitase sat on the bed, waiting for Mary to wake up. When a completely naked Mary sat up, the first thing she saw was Kitase, who looked both familiar and a bit strange. She didn't realize she was in another world and asked Kitase why he suddenly looked older. Kitase didn't answer her question, but asked how she felt, given they had just been struck by a dragon's breath. That's when Mary noticed she was naked and quickly wrapped herself in a blanket, scolding Kitase fiercely. Since Kitase had no women's clothes at home, he had to rush to the mall to buy some. He was filled with questions, wondering if the world he thought was a dream was actually real. He hurriedly bought a bunch of lingerie and returned home to find Mary gazing out the window at the unfamiliar scenery. Mary had realized by then that she was not in her own world, but she wasn't worried or uncomfortable. Instead, she was excited, marveling at living in such a high building. "Kitase, you must be rich," she exclaimed, noticing a tall tower nearby, which she thought might be where a great sorcerer lived. Kitase explained that it was called Sky Tower and that the view from there must be amazing, especially now during the cherry blossom season. He decided to take Mary out to enjoy the day. Excited, Mary jumped on Kitase, forgetting she wasn't dressed, and quickly changed into the sailor uniform he bought for her. She looked surprisingly fitting as an elf in a Japanese school uniform, and she loved the compliments from Kitase. She guessed they were in Japan, the country Kitazi had mentioned before. Kitazi then gave Mary a hat to cover her long elf ears before taking her out. Although Mary was ambitious at first, she revealed her true, less composed self once in the car. Fortunately, Kitazi took her to a restaurant where, before the meal was served, he explained the situation. He had dreamt every night since he was very young, playing in a magical world with Mary as part of his dream world adventures. It wasn't until Mary came with him to Japan from that world that he realized the dream world was also real and that his sleep allowed him to travel between the two worlds. Awakening here usually followed an attack there. This time, being attacked by a magic dragon while embracing Mary might have caused her to come with him. He suspected they could return to the other world simply by sleeping again. Kitas also explained that his age differed between the two worlds, which is why he suddenly seemed older. Just as he finished explaining, the waiter brought their food. Mary, already a fan of Kitazi's Japanese cooking, thoroughly enjoyed the meal. After eating, Kitazi took Mary to see the cherry blossoms, hoping she would enjoy this beautiful season. A welcome to the elf lady to Japan. Kitazi woke up to find an elf wife beside him. Instead of investigating this phenomenon, he took Mary on a date. In this world without monsters, everyone lives peacefully, which Mary found beautiful. She suddenly asked Kitase what would happen if she couldn't return to her original world. Kitase, thrilled, blushed, and said they could live together, travel to various places, enjoy hot springs, delicious food, and beautiful scenery. His words sounded almost like a proposal. That night, after a tiring day, they returned home. Kitase prepared a bath for Mary, who thought the bath salts were magical. In her world, only nobility could enjoy such luxuries. Kitase also cooked dinner, making a simple pork cutlet rice bowl that Mary highly praised. Since there were leftovers, Kitase decided to pack them for their next journey to her world, where only food and drinks could be brought. Kitase had previously tried bringing a flashlight. Mary didn't know what it was, so he demonstrated it by turning off the room's lights and switching on the flashlight. Mary wasn't surprised, having adapted to the civilization here. Kitase concluded that cultural and technological items likely couldn't be transported, as even simple items like pens or notebooks were forbidden. Mary asked if there was a special ritual for transporting items, but Kitase said he just placed them beside the bed, sparking Mary's curiosity. She theorized that someone must be managing the rules for what can be transported, and Kitase must have a reason or mission for bringing her here. Before sleeping, they planned their escape from the magic dragon's lair where they were trapped. Kitase asked Mary for any information about the dragon. She knew that the dragon's intelligence surpassed humans. Its breath produced endless magic, and it was powerful enough to devastate worlds. Kitase wanted to hear trivia about the dragon to guess its personality. Mary shared that the dragon's scales were magical and of great value. It could transform into a human and had visited a city, staying for a few days before leaving. The location was a harbor town. With a sudden idea, Kitase rummaged through a cabinet, then prepared to sleep with Mary. Excited, she quickly got into bed and patted the space beside her, urging Kitase to join her. Kitase swallowed hard, tempted by the thought of sharing a bed with an elf beauty. Mary, unaware of the implications, suggested they cuddle closely since they had been attacked by the dragon while hugging. Embarrassed but determined to return to their world, they embraced and soon fell asleep. They safely returned to their world and were ready to face the dragon. As Mary spoke, the dragon emerged. Kitase held Mary's hand and began communicating with the dragon, introducing themselves and explaining their peaceful intentions to see the dragon eggs. The dragon paused its attack, and Kitase quickly offered a bottle of whiskey from the harbor town, known for its barley malt liquor. If the rumors were true, the dragon might be interested in the whiskey. Indeed, after sniffing the whiskey, the dragon relaxed slightly and asked why they had resurrected. Kitase explained that he traveled from another world through dreams, which intrigued the dragon. Kitase told the dragon about his dreams from another world, which the dragon found amusing. Pleased, it showed them its eggs, and then smelled the aroma coming from Kitase. The dragon asked if he was hiding something, so Kitase pulled out the pork cutlet lunchbox. The hot floor had warmed the lunchbox, releasing a delicious scent. The hungry dragon transformed into a human form. Surprisingly, a beautiful, robust woman. She demanded the food and drink from Kitase, and haughtily said she was just tasting, not really wanting to eat inferior creature food. However, she agreed to trade a dragon scale for the lunchbox. Kitase handed it over, and the dragon ate voraciously, but choked. Kitase quickly gave her a beer, winning her over with the food and drink. He then explained to Mary, who didn't understand the dragon language, that the dragon wanted to give them a scale. Mary was shocked. A simple lunchbox had fetched a legendary dragon scale, which had once caused wars. The dragon lady had already finished one lunchbox, so Kitase pulled out another, which he traded for a shiny stone stained with her blood. Mary, excited by the value of these items, urged Kitase to trade more lunchboxes for stones. The dragon, not wanting further interruptions to her meal, opened the door and sent them away, reminding Kitase to bring 4 lunchboxes next time. Mary was still reeling from the shock. They had traded lunchboxes for dragon blood and scales, treasures said to cure any disease. These items were highly valuable and couldn't be carelessly given or sold, as it would raise questions about their origin and potentially expose the dragon's lair. Kitase then realized how the civilization at this site had perished. The dragon laid eggs once every 1,000 years, and the local people had attempted to steal the eggs, leading to a chase into the underground city and the eventual fall of the civilization, turning it into the dragon's lair. Mary packed the dragon scale and blood into Kitase's backpack. Although unsure how to use them, it was safer for Kitase to keep them. Since all the lunchboxes were gone, they planned to go to a nearby town for a meal and find a hotel for Mary, as Kitase could sleep anywhere and would return to Japan after falling asleep. Surprisingly, Mary mentioned it didn't matter where she stayed because she planned to go to Kitase's country with him. Kitase and Mary have started living together part-time. Mary has even begun learning Japanese. Kitase feels incredibly happy seeing his elf wife warmly waiting for him each day after work. He doesn't disturb Mary while she studies, but she quickly notices him. Today, Kitase bought minced meat to make fried dumplings. Unexpectedly, Mary introduced herself in fluent Japanese, which led him to open a bottle of wine and share some study tips with her. Mary aims to learn conversational Japanese in 2 months, and Kitase, knowing she is a centuries-old elf, fully believes she can achieve this. While offering her a glass of wine to smell, she mistakenly thought he wanted her to smell him, leading to a shy and awkward moment between them. The atmosphere grew tender. Soon, Kitase finished cooking the dumplings. Mary, trying this dish for the first time, was so excited that she danced around. The crispy dumplings paired perfectly with the chilled wine, making Kitase happy to see her enjoy the meal. He told her he could make this simple dish anytime she wanted. After dinner, Kitase did the dishes. Mary suddenly remembered the dragon scales and blood and asked him where he stored these items. Kitase reassured her not to worry, as the items he keeps on the other side would always be with him when he wakes up there, just like her clothes and wand. It seemed that after their arrival, their belongings might turn invisible with them. The more they discussed, the more it seemed like someone was managing these matters. But Kitase was more interested in spending every day having fun with Mary. However, as a member of the Magician's Guild, Mary has many responsibilities waiting for her. Mentioning this, Kitase recalled that their world had magic stones, though no one had ever seen them. He suggested they visit the legendary former magic stone quarry, which intrigued Mary. She reminded him to prepare a lunchbox for the trip. That night, they slept in each other's arms. Kitase felt that since Mary's arrival, he had been falling asleep faster. Considering Mary's goal to learn Japanese in 2 months, it meant they could be together until then. He wondered if he could still sleep well if Mary left after that. When Kitase and Mary woke up in that world, it was a beautiful sunny day. Kitase casually picked a small white flower and opened the map to show Mary their destination. It was so far that even traveling by carriage would take over a week. Luckily, Kitase had a teleportation skill. After picking up Mary, he activated the skill, and the next second, they plunged into the void. This was a lower layer of the world, where Kitase's skill, a long-distance travel ability linked to a shrine stone with the traveler's name inscribed, allowed for daily teleportation. Not many knew of this skill, but Kitase had learned it due to his interest in traveling. After explaining this to Mary, she reminded him to put her down, making Kitase blush and quickly set her down. Using this skill, it only took them 20 minutes to reach their destination. Kitase asked Mary to stay close, since he usually traveled alone and wasn't sure what would happen with another person. Mary clung to him, and soon they were back on solid ground. Kitase placed the flower he had picked on the shrine stone, a local custom to offer a flower from the departure location upon arrival. They then headed towards the ancient quarry, rumored to be a source of magic stones used in exquisite magical tools. The place was once bustling and so significant that the nation had built a massive fortress to protect its interests. However, for reasons unknown, the magic stones could no longer be found, leading to the site's gradual decay over the past 200 years. Kitase believed that the magic stones were not truly depleted. While he was passionately discussing this, Mary was overwhelmed by the heat. Kitase comforted her, saying an oasis wasn't far ahead. They soon reached a complex of ancient buildings which sparked some interest in Mary. Kitase suggested they could stay and investigate for a few days, but Mary immediately refused, not wanting to endure the heat. Just then, Kitase sensed someone watching them, but didn't investigate further. They proceeded to the nearby oasis, a perfect spot for a breeze and a picnic. They unpacked their lunch, which today included fried rice. The taste of Kitase's cooking instantly revitalized Mary. Curious if Kitase had other skills, they checked each other's ability panels. Mary was surprised to see Kitase's level was as high as 72, the highest she had ever seen. Her level was lower because she was studying both elven and magical arts, which made it difficult to advance. Kitase, comparing their panels, grew even more admiring of Mary. Indeed, she was a true elven magician, a rare and chosen profession. In this world, magicians' missions were to unravel ancient mysteries, and some were even employed by nations for wars. Kitase's profession was a dream knight, akin to a trickster. After resting, Kitase and Mary went down, unaware that they were already being watched. Typically, magicians use wands to cast attack spells, but Mary, as an elf magician, uses contracted spirits as mediums for her magic. Demonstrating this to Kitase, she tapped her wand on the ground, producing a burst of flame that transformed into a fire salamander spirit, which then carried out her magical commands. Mary's good compatibility allowed her to maintain several spirits at once. No sooner had she finished explaining this than a beast emerged from the water. Kitase quickly drew his short sword to protect Mary and leaped to kill the creature. However, such beasts usually live in groups. As expected, more emerged from the bushes and water. Kitase used his short-range teleportation skill to swiftly eliminate them. All this was observed from above, including by a man with X-ray vision who noticed the dragon blood and scales in Kitase's bag. Although the man did not recognize these items, he was sure they were valuable treasures and sent a young orc child to approach Kitase. By then, Kitase and Mary had defeated all the beasts, but Kitase could still sense an unfamiliar presence. He noticed the orc child above, holding what seemed to be a magical catalyst. Mary sensed strong magic in it, and the next moment, a huge magical snake emerged from the water. Kitase had never seen such a creature before. His long-distance teleportation skill could only be used once a day, and his short-range skill couldn't carry Mary with him. He shielded her with his body, but they were instantly killed by the snake's breath and woke up in another world. The relief of surviving was overwhelming, and they embraced each other. Kitase warmed up 2 cups of milk, and then told Mary that since they had entered the ruins, they had been watched. During the fight with the beasts, he had felt several presences, likely thieves who were probably now frantically searching for their bodies and backpack. The child looked terrified and was probably coerced by the thieves. However, Kitase and Mary couldn't return immediately. Luckily, it was the weekend, and Kitase could stay home and enjoy some peaceful time with Mary. Kitase and Mary happened to return to Japan over the weekend, so they took the opportunity to go out on a date. While walking by the river, they encountered a kitten. Mary immediately ran to play with it, and surprisingly, the kitten seemed to like her. Their interaction delighted Kitase. They then visited a library, which was vastly different from those in the fantasy world, where books are considered valuable and sunlight harmful to them, leading to dark, dusty libraries. To help Mary learn Japanese, Kitase planned to take her to the children's section. Initially, Mary thought he was treating her like a child, but she changed her mind after seeing the picture books there. She picked up a series of picture books about a cat traveling around the world and liked it so much that Kitase offered to borrow it for her and read it to her, making her very excited. While processing the library card, they encountered Kitase's old acquaintance, Karuko, the librarian. Karuko, seeing Kitase with a beautiful girl, curiously asked about her. Kitase explained that she was a relative from abroad, and the picture book was to help her learn Japanese. Karuko greeted Mary and asked her name, giving Mary a chance to practice her Japanese. But when Karuko added chan to her name, explaining it as a term of endearment for younger, cute girls, Mary humorously added chan to Karuko's name, charming her instantly. Karuko was shocked and jokingly asked Kitase if he had started a romantic relationship, which he quickly denied, not wanting Mary to think less of him. Mary, not understanding their conversation, just stood aside while Karuko processed the library books using Kitase's driver's license. It turned out Kitase had recently moved to the same apartment building as Karuko, who then invited them to dinner to get to know the neighbors better, mainly to become friends with Mary. Back home, Kitase played an animated DVD for Mary and cooked dinner. They watched the animation together while enjoying dessert. Mary had already seen it once but wanted Kitase to explain it again. The animation featured landscapes from old Japan, similar to those near Kitase's grandfather's house. Seeing Mary's interest, Kitase suggested they visit there next holiday. Their day was filled with enjoyment, and after watching the animation, Mary, overwhelmed with excitement, playfully tackled Kitase. Although she barely understood the dialogue, the visuals alone made her very happy. Knowing Japan had many interesting animations and games, she became even more determined to learn Japanese. Gently touching Kitase's chest, she bashfully asked him to fulfill her wish, which turned out to be just watching the animation again. Kitase thought he might as well cook dinner during this time, but then a minor earthquake occurred. Kitase was about to inform Mary when she ran out of the bathroom, naked, and crashed into his arms. After calming the startled Mary, Kitase felt quite accomplished for managing to keep his composure. After Mary changed her clothes, dinner was ready, and both felt a bit embarrassed. Kitase apologized first, regretting that he hadn't warned her about Japan's frequent earthquakes. Mary graciously said it didn't matter. Then she noticed the dry curry on the dinner table and was overwhelmed by its strong aroma as soon as she sat down. She eagerly took a bite, finding it unexpectedly spicy but also sweet from the vegetables, which made her keep eating. As evening fell, it was time for them to return to the other world to discuss how to resolve the ongoing crisis there. It was already a new day there, and Kitase's long-distance movement had refreshed, allowing them immediate escape upon their return. However, they were still worried about the child they had left behind, suspecting that the magical catalyst in his possession held some secret, which was probably why he was targeted by thieves. Mary suddenly remembered an ancient document she had read, which mentioned that the cat-like beast folk were adept at using magic stones. She speculated that the child might be from the cat tribe. That night, Kitase and Mary cuddled in bed while Kitase read from the picture book until Mary fell asleep. As Kitase watched her sleeping face, he couldn't help but think about enjoying the scenery near his grandfather's house with her. After wishing her a good night, Kitase also fell asleep. The next second, they woke up in the other world. They formed a team for easier telepathic communication and confirmed their combat plan. Their goals were to rescue the beast child and repel the thieves. Mary used her light elf to cast invisibility on herself, while Kitase went to locate the child, who was surely guarded by thieves. He planned to use himself as bait to draw the thieves away, anticipating they would force the child to summon monsters again. While Mary distracted the monsters, Kitase neared the thieves' den. Mary created a distraction, and the thieves checked outside. Seeing Kitase's provocative stance, they went to inform their leader. As expected, a huge monster appeared, and the beast child was seen holding a magic stone. Mary directed fire elves to distract the monster like playing whack-a-mole, while Kitase rushed to the child's side and found he was indeed from the cat tribe and had been restrained. Kitase spoke in the beast language to assure the child of his benign intentions, which lowered the child's guard. The child had been living in seclusion with his grandfather when the thieves attacked, killing the grandfather and capturing him. Although Kitase sympathized with his plight, they needed to escape first. The child placed his paw in Kitase's hand, but the thieves were already pursuing them. The leader of the thieves guessed Kitase had specialized mobility skills and offered a deal, demanding a backpack full of treasures in exchange for the child's freedom. Realizing the leader knew about the treasures because of his sensing abilities, Kitase knew he couldn't be trusted. He teleported and shattered the stone, freeing the child from his chains. Despite the leader's anger, Kitase, with his agility and teleportation skills, outmaneuvered the thieves. A bald brute then pushed Kitase to the edge of a cliff, but Kitase suddenly disappeared, causing the brute to fall instead. The child took the chance to escape, and Kitase met up with him, explaining his illusion skill that creates phantoms. He asked the child, Moi, to wait while he disappeared again, catching the thieves off guard. He temporarily hid in their den and contacted Mary, learning she was also doing well. They planned to meet up, but before that, Kitase wanted to figure out what the leader was up to. He had a bad feeling just as the leader spotted Mary's hiding place. The leader sent his subordinates to capture her from the bushes. Kitase rushed to intercept them. The leader attempted a magical sneak attack, but Kitase dodged it. However, the leader captured the child in the meantime and used him to threaten Kitase. Grudgingly, Kitase approached, throwing down his sword to reduce weight for teleportation, pretending to surrender. Then he teleported away with Moi, acting as a cushion to protect the child during their sandy landing. They quickly went to meet up with Mary. Just then, the monster emerged from the sand, too close to escape. Kitase remained calm, wondering if dying here would send him back to Japan as usual, but concerned for Mary's safety. Resolved not to die, Kitase was surprised to see the monster not attacking but reaching out tentacles towards Moi, apparently searching for something. Moi pulled out the magic stone, recalling his grandfather's words about its exceptional quality among magic stones and how it led to their village's destruction. When the stone was unearthed, monsters from deep underground were awakened. His ancestors from the cat tribe had to flee their homeland, hiding from both monsters and humans ever since. It seemed the monster wanted this magic stone, so Moi handed it over. The monster took the stone and immediately returned underground, causing the sand above to collapse and reveal a large pit, which turned out to be an underground labyrinth. Kitase inspected the pit and realized it was a labyrinth. Mary ran over, relieved to see everyone safe. She particularly liked Moi's fluffy appearance and kept hugging him. They reported the discovery of the labyrinth and the thieves to the soldiers, hoping they would help settle Moi. The soldiers agreed, recognizing the potential benefits and possible disasters the labyrinth could bring to the nation. Soon, the royal family dispatched a reconnaissance team to the underground labyrinth. Although Kitase and Mary were foreigners, as discoverers, they were granted special permission to explore. However, as a member of the Magicians Guild, Mary's involvement in such a dangerous labyrinth might not be permitted by the guild, which would likely send a higher-level magician instead. Kitase said he would also stay back if Mary couldn't go, as he looked forward to exploring the labyrinth with her. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was overheard by a magic dragon through a dragon bloodstone. The dragon knew the site was a land of catastrophe. Meanwhile, the egg she was carrying began to crack, signaling it was about to hatch, and the dragon found herself missing the taste of a certain bento. Back in Japan, Kitase made sandwiches for breakfast, and Mary didn't leave a single drop of sauce on the plate. Today, Kitase was supposed to go to work, but before leaving, he suggested they explore the labyrinth together since they could easily return here by sleeping. Mary was tempted, knowing she had a way to get the Magicians Guild's approval by demonstrating their abilities to reassure them. They resolved to devise a combat plan. After a reluctant farewell, Mary sent Kitase off to work. On his way, Kitase pondered their abilities, noting that both were offensive types. It would be beneficial to have someone responsible for defense. While Kitase was at work, Mary did a thorough cleaning at home. After finishing, she started studying Japanese on her own. By noon, she took out the chicken Kitase had marinated from the fridge. All she needed to do was bake it in the oven for lunch. Kitase had left detailed instructions, which were simple for Mary to follow. In a few minutes, the aroma of the chicken, her favorite flavor, filled the air. Kitase knew her taste well. After the chicken was ready, Mary ate while watching an animated show. Meanwhile, Kitase felt a bit lonely, eating his sandwich and worrying whether Mary managed to cook the chicken properly. Then, he received a message from Kaoruko, inviting them to a get-together that evening. Initially, Kitase thought to decline, but then he thought it would be good for Mary to make more friends in this world, so he agreed. After work, Kitase took Mary to a cafe, her first time trying coffee. She initially frowned at the bitterness, so Kitase added some milk and sugar which she found much tastier. Mary joked about how she was increasingly adapting to life in this world. While they were playfully bantering, Kaoruko and her husband arrived. After introductions, Kaoruko's husband had already booked a fancy restaurant, which was more expensive than expected. Fortunately, Kitase could afford it, but Kaoruko's husband insisted on paying since it was their treat. At the restaurant, they had a French meal served in courses. Mary, who had never experienced such dining, was amazed by each dish. The highlight was the foie gras, which she found irresistibly delicious, especially with steak. When she heard there were desserts to come, she almost couldn't handle her excitement, worrying she might never enjoy food in the other world as much again. After dinner, they found another cafe to chat. Mary shared that she was learning Japanese while watching animations, and Kitase mentioned planning a trip to visit his grandfather in the countryside, wanting Mary to get used to traveling first. Kaoruko's husband recommended a place with a hot spring run by an acquaintance. Mary was very interested. Leaving the cafe, Mary and Kaoruko had become good friends, with plans to visit each other's homes next time. Kitase thought it was great for Mary to have fun while he was at work. On their way home, Kitase and Mary returned to the other world and visited the labyrinth they had previously discovered. They learned that something similar to a magic stone had been unearthed. Magic stones are incredibly valuable resources, so the authorities immediately ordered the site to be sealed off. However, Kitase didn't see this as entirely good news, but he and Mary began gathering information nonetheless. Mary dragged Kitase to see a great magician who instantly realized that Kitase didn't fully belong to this world. Kitase's maturity during their conversation impressed the old man, who couldn't help but complain to Mary about how challenging it must be to live with him. Mary not only disagreed, but also praised Kitase enthusiastically, making him blush. They then discussed the magic stones. The great magician felt that people were overly excited about the discovery. He mentioned that magic stones were traditionally crafted by the cat tribe. He wondered why humans couldn't do the same and noted that the existence of magic stones wasn't a secret until about 2 centuries ago. Yet there was almost no documentation, as if someone had deliberately erased the ancient labyrinths from history. During the conversation, the old man called over a tall man named Hakam, the commander of the labyrinth exploration. Hakam knew that as the discoverers, Kitase and Mary had obtained a permit to investigate. However, he still cautioned them against taking reckless actions. Kitase assured him they would not enter the labyrinth soon due to potential unknown dangers, which reassured Hakam. The old man, however, commented skeptically on their plans after revealing to the crowd that the pair were living together, which drew teasing from those around and embarrassed both Kitase and Mary. They quickly left the scene with their investigation permit. While walking around the town, which was situated in a hot desert, Kitase bought Mary a set of cool clothing, including a matching veil, which he tenderly placed on her, much like a veil on a bride, leaving him speechless with adoration. After shopping, they visited Moi, who had fully recovered from his injuries, and was very grateful for Kitase and Mary's help. Mary embraced Moi upon seeing him. Hakam had summoned them because he needed Kitase to act as a translator, as no one else understood the beast language. Hakam then showed them a stone found by the advance team that resembled a magic stone. Mary asked Moi to touch it, and the stone indeed glowed, indicating its magical properties. Moi instinctively refined it into a magic catalyst. Although weaker than previous stones Moi had handled, it felt very similar. Hakam was thrilled, immediately securing the stone to report it. He also asked Kitase to help teach Moi the common language, which Kitase agreed to before they all shared a lunch. Mary fed Moi, who had never tasted such delicious food before, and contentedly lay on Mary's lap afterwards. During the break, Kitase took out dragon blood and scales they had obtained from a magic dragon and asked Moi to refine them. Moi had never done this before but was willing to try. They found that power was being transferred from afar into the materials. Mary noticed the light from the dragon blood dimming, suggesting something might have happened to the magic dragon. As the dragon blood and scales began to flicker, Kitase tried to communicate with the distant magic dragon, but received no response. Deciding to investigate, Kitase and Mary planned to check it out together. News of the labyrinth reached the Magicians' Association. They decided to select a representative to explore the labyrinth with Mary. However, some argued that no representative was needed and that the discoverers should handle it themselves. This suggestion came from Mary's master, who was confident in Mary's abilities. The final decision would wait until Mary's return for further discussion. Meanwhile, Kitasi and Mary returned to the ruins. A lizardman elder guided them, mentioning that the magical beasts rarely encountered the magic dragon directly, but even they sensed something was amiss recently, often hearing terrifying moans inside. After guiding them in, the lizardman quickly left. To their surprise, when the lights came on, they found 3 baby dragons. Previously laid dragon eggs had hatched. The magic dragon had reverted to her elder sister form and urged Kitasi to pull out the object. Unfortunately, they had already eaten all their lunch, which upset the magic dragon, who had been nourishing the baby dragons with her magic to prevent them from starving. Angrily, she threw a tantrum on the floor. Kitase, trying to calm the situation, suggested she could join them at a hot spring. He and Mary were planning a hot spring trip that weekend. The magic dragon was more than happy to join, eager for the invitation. Since Kitasi and the dragon had been conversing in the dragon language, Mary did not understand much until later when she found out about the hot spring plans and scolded Kitasi for not informing her sooner. They then realized they needed to hurry to the Magicians Association before it closed, and they managed to get there just before dark. Afterwards, Mary was busy reporting to the Magicians Association and dealing with backlogged tasks. Kitase was similarly overwhelmed with work in Japan, leaving them little time together. Fortunately, the weekend finally arrived, which they both looked forward to. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was overheard by a green-haired member of the association who opposed Mary's master and had been secretly tracking them. He was shocked to see Kitasi and the lizardman elder chatting amiably, and even more so when he witnessed 2 ancient killing machines. Kitase and Mary passed safely, but the green-haired man dared not act rashly. He used his ability, Revelation, to spy inside and discovered the dragons and baby dragons. The magic dragon noticed his spying, activating the ancient killing machines. He had to flee desperately to save his life, sweating profusely and wondering about Kitasi's true identity. The next day, Kitasi woke up to find himself face to face with the naked elder sister, who pushed his head against her chest. Kitasi screamed, waking Mary up. Afterwards, Kitasi brought his own clothes for the magic dragon, but they didn't fit at all. He kept his back turned, unable to face her. Mary, who had learned some common sense, conversed with the magic dragon, explaining that she needed to retract her tail and horns and dress properly before going out. The magic dragon then transformed, creating her own clothes, allowing Kitase to finally open his eyes. Kitase then drove the 2 beauties, showing a stark contrast to Mary's first arrival in Japan. The magic dragon, Uludola, was much calmer, quickly understanding the mechanics of their surroundings. After driving for a few hours, Kitase asked Mary to hand out the rice balls they had prepared for their lunch in the car. Each rice ball was a different flavor, which Uludola found particularly fascinating, even taking the leftovers for herself. They arrived at their destination in the afternoon. Before getting out of the car, Mary put on a hat to hide her ears. Uludola said it was unnecessary and styled Mary's hair to cover her ears, which Mary greatly appreciated, finding the new hairstyle even cuter. Kitase bought them skewers to snack on, and both were amazed at the taste, giving enthusiastic thumbs up. They then arrived at the hot spring inn they had booked, where Kitase had reserved a room with a private bath, concerned about Mary's ears being exposed. However, Uludola had already solved that issue, so they could enjoy the communal bath. They eagerly changed into yukatas and headed to the bathhouse. Uludola was about to jump into the water when Mary stopped her, explaining that they must wash their bodies in the cleaning area first, a practice Kitase had taught her. They washed and then entered the hot spring, sighing with relief at the comfort, feeling almost unreal. While Mary was in a dazed state, Uludola asked if they could enter the ancient labyrinth. Mary responded instinctively, only realizing something was amiss afterwards. How did Uludola know about it? Indeed, the dragon scale could be used for eavesdropping. Uludola was merely curious about Kitase's identity, concerned that some might have ulterior motives. She hadn't expected that Kitase would be sleeping with an elven beauty every night. Mary, embarrassed, warned Uludola not to spy anymore, or she wouldn't bring her to the hot springs again. Uludola quickly assured her that she only heard voices and respected their privacy even if they were kissing. She heard nothing. This embarrassed Mary further. Seeing her reaction, Uludola, experienced in these matters, knew Mary was harboring a young girl's crush. They went to the steam room to talk privately. Despite the dizzying steam, it offered a different kind of comfort compared to the hot springs. They resumed their conversation, with Uludola explaining that her body was nearly elven, while fairy-like Mary was fundamentally different from humans. If Mary wanted to get closer to Kitasi, she would need to gradually change her mindset and body. Uludola encouraged her, saying that she would eventually be with Kitasi. However, Mary lacked confidence because Kitasi never touched her. They hadn't even kissed, making her feel treated like a child. Uludola reassured her that this was only because Kitasi cherished her greatly and even gave Mary some advice. Soon after, Mary left the bath alone and met up with Kitasi. Together, they went for a foot bath. Mary took this opportunity to thank Kitasi and then, mischievously, kissed his forehead to let him feel the same emotions as her. This was the idea Uludola had suggested. Observing Kitasi's reaction after the kiss would tell her if there was any hope. When they returned to their room, Uludola was already impatient. Kitasi quickly ordered dinner. Tonight's meal was a local specialty, giant pork cutlet rice bowl, named for its size resembling straw sandals, and known for its crispy deliciousness. It paired wonderfully with Japanese sake. With some time left before bed, Kitasi suggested they could return to their room for another soak while he would visit the communal bath again. Alone, Kitasi reflected on Mary's kiss. On the way back, Kitasi was still reminiscing about Mary's kiss. He gently covered the sleeping Mary with a blanket, which led Uludola to tease him, noting that usually women take care of men, not the other way around. Kitasi replied that times had changed. Uludola then complained that Kitasi only had eyes for Mary and didn't understand his urgency to explore ancient dungeons, eventually crying out of frustration. Kitasi quickly comforted him. That night, they took a break from traveling. Kitasi was curious why Uludola was out with them instead of caring for the children in the nest. To his surprise, Uludola revealed that he was not the original, but one of 7 dragon cores. The original was back in the nest looking after the children and only needed to synchronize occasionally. Therefore, joining them for the dungeon adventure was not a problem. Essentially, Uludola just wanted to have fun, so Kitasi agreed to go along, though he suddenly remembered he hadn't discussed it with Mary yet. Decisions like this couldn't be made without her agreement, so they would have to wait until Mary woke up. That night, they returned to the other world to continue their journey together. Uludola wanted to accompany Kitasi and Mary to the Magician's Guild and hid his dragon horns and tail to blend in. However, before they reached the guild, they were stopped by a magician named Stan, who had a bad reputation within the guild and was clearly looking for trouble. He questioned Kitasa about his nightly disappearances, having noticed that Kitasi's presence vanished each evening, which was impossible for ordinary humans. His second question was about the magical dragon they encountered and how they survived such a fearsome creature. Stan wasn't much interested in the answers, as his intentions wouldn't change. He planned to flay Kitasi to see if he was a monster, then head to the ancient dungeon to defeat its monsters and explorers, claiming the treasures for a triumphant life. He had his minions restrain Mary and Uludola, signaling an unavoidable confrontation. Kitase borrowed a sword from Uludola, which felt different from any he had used before, and instructed Mary to stay close to Uludola before engaging Stan in a fierce battle. Unbeknownst to Stan, his bullying of the children was being live-streamed by his rivals in the guild. Stan kept attacking, but Kitase was merely dodging, using his skill, Simpleton, which allowed him to record and anticipate Stan's moves for effective evasion or counterattack. Although simple, the skill could produce unexpected results with repeated use. Growing impatient, Stan rushed at Kitasi, who sped up and vanished just as Stan swung his sword, then reappeared behind him. Surprisingly, Stan blocked this sneak attack and activated his clairvoyance. Nearby, Mary and Uludola started arguing because Uludola, now their shield, was unarmed. Uludola claimed she didn't need any weapons, infuriating Stan's minions, who couldn't bear being disregarded. They summoned numerous magical beasts, but these were just the spirits of wyverns. As the spirits advanced, Uludola revealed his dragon horns and tail and merely glared at them, scaring all the wyvern spirits away. The minions were instantly sweating and pleading for mercy. At this moment, Kitasi was not gaining the upper hand. It seemed as though his movements were being predicted by his opponent. It was then that he noticed Stan's unusually keen eyes. Could it be that Stan had the ability to see the future? Kitase, undeterred, launched another attack. However, Stan merely grazed his face with the tip of his foot, leaving a cut. Stan had also figured out Kitase's skill and pinpointed where Kitase would move next, kicking him into the lake. Fortunately, Kitase was unharmed, and Uludola and Mary were still sitting by the lake, watching the excitement. However, Kitase had thought of a way to win. He engaged Stan in combat once again. This time, Stan's clairvoyance seemed ineffective. Kitase not only dodged his attacks but also moved behind him and swung his sword. Stan caught the blade bare-handed, while his other swords closed in from both sides. But the next second, Kitase suddenly released his sword and kicked Stan in the chin. It turned out that Stan's ability, called Apocalypse, became more precise with each use but also more predictable, making it easier for Kitase's simpleton skill to record and exploit. In essence, Kitase had seen through all of Stan's movements. Surprisingly, Stan had lost to a teenager, although Kitase was actually nearly 30. Afterward, Mary and her companions went to the Magician's Guild. Unexpectedly, the guild leader was a kind old man who quickly agreed to let Kitase and Uludola accompany Mary to the dungeon, even skipping the usual inspection process. This was naturally thanks to Mary's master's influence. Moreover, the guild leader and Uludola turned out to be old acquaintances who had fought side by side as friends in their younger days. Out of respect for the guild leader, Uludola agreed to leave the punishment of the two magicians to the guild. After several twists and turns, Kitase and his group arrived once again in the country where the dungeon was located. They first went to see Mui. Mary was eager to get close to Mui, but Mui was terrified upon seeing Uludola. Uludola took out a stone tainted with dragon blood and asked Mui to process it, teaching him the technique. In Mui's hands, the stone quickly transformed, becoming glass-like, and eventually turned into a staff. Uludola gave this staff to Mary as a reward for her courage at the hot springs. Finally, Kitase and his group were ready to begin their official exploration. Kitase and his group were finally ready to officially explore the labyrinth. A market had sprung up nearby, and they needed to shop before entering. Uludola decided to stay behind, not wanting to be a third wheel to the couple. Kitase planned to buy a tent and casually asked about the price of tea. The vendor, seeing his young age, wasn't keen on serving him as the goods were expensive. Mary then showed a permit, proving they were part of an exploration team. The vendor tried to overcharge them, but another man revealed himself as the captain of the exploration team. He helped Kitase and Mary bargain hard, even arranging for someone to set up their tent and lend them some furniture. Given that they had discovered the labyrinth, they were considered to have brought great wealth to their nation. Captain Jera told Kitase and Mary to approach him if they needed anything. Another team captain, Dora, came by and gifted Kitase a can of tea as a welcome present. After Dora left, Jera's subordinate joked about when the captain's own spring would come. That evening, Mary couldn't wait to lie in the bed Jera had provided, all of which were high-end products. She assumed the captain must be wealthy. This gesture made Kitase, accustomed to sleeping outdoors, feel grateful. Uludola didn't join them for the night in Japan, staying behind to observe other teams. Thus, only Kitase and Mary woke up there the next morning. Kitase had also brought the can of tea, and their breakfast consisted of bread and tea. It had been a long time since they had some alone time together. A mere mention made Mary blush. However, as they spent more time alone, Kitase kept bringing up Uludola to Mary's growing impatience. Suddenly, he suggested they cook together since it was the weekend. After a trip to the supermarket and Kitase buying Mary an ice cream which she tasted for the first time and loved, she wished Uludola could join them. Kitase guessed Uludola had intentionally given them this private time. Back home, they entered the kitchen together. Kitase had Mary chop vegetables, but worried she might not handle a knife well. Mary reminded him that she could cook on her own, chopping onions and asserting her maturity, though she soon teared up from the onions, unfamiliar in her world. Kitase quickly handed her a tissue. Before long, they had cooked a pot of curry, a unique dish from Japan, filling the air with its aroma. Meanwhile, Uludola was alone until she heard Kitase remark on the beautiful moonlight. A perfect setting for a meal with a charming lady. However, these were words Mary had taught Kitase, and she had him invite Uludola to join them for dinner. Uludola enjoyed the meal immensely, and Mary excitedly told her she had cooked most of it, albeit with significant help from Kitase. They finished the whole pot of curry. Kitase volunteered to wash the dishes while Uludola inquired about his work. Knowing their holidays were rare, Kitase reassured her that the upcoming Golden Week would provide a break, a time many workers used for travel. Mary then showed Uludola the bullet train schedule and produced 2 train tickets. Realizing only she and Mary could go, Kitase quickly explained that he had long planned to visit his grandfather with Mary. Feeling for Uludola, Mary promised that next time they would definitely include her. The next day, they returned to the other world. Before setting out, they greeted Hakam and introduced their new shield-bearer, Uludola. Hakam was instantly smitten with Uludola, but his compliments were cut short by the great mage who tapped him on the head. The old mage wanted Kitase and his team to see something, and showed them an incomplete map of the labyrinth. He then gave Kitase a magical device imprinted with the map, which could also be used for communication. This would allow them to call for help if they encountered danger in the labyrinth. Hakam then asked what they planned to name their team. Since other teams usually chose names of gems, Kitase named theirs the Amethyst Team, inspired by Mary's crystal-clear, amethyst-like eyes. After a brief delay at Hakam's, the trio reached the entrance of the labyrinth and found a long queue. Compared to the fully equipped teams, Kitase and his group seemed more like they were there for a picnic. However, the old mage had the most confidence in them, believing they could find what others could not. Once inside the labyrinth, it grew darker the deeper they went. Mary summoned a light spirit with her new wand, which Uludola had enhanced to allow her to form contracts with higher-level spirits. The light from the spirit made their path clear, and they soon discovered a large mural with ancient text. Mary recognized the script, which told myths from the age of demons, a time before humans when only primitive beings, demons, existed. It was said that the world was once enveloped in eternal night, with creatures pale and fragile until the demons appeared. Uludola, being an ancient creature, knew more about these matters but chose not to dampen the couple's adventurous spirit, letting them explore on their own. Soon, they opened another door, and Uludola's face showed nostalgia, as the room was filled with the air of ancient times. However, their long walk had encountered no demons, preventing Kitase and Mary from leveling up their new weapons. So, Uludola decided to initiate an attack herself. Taking this opportunity, she thought it a good moment to give Kitase some rigorous training. Today, when Kitase woke up, not only was there a beautiful elf beside him, but there was also a little black cat. The noise of him falling out of bed woke up Mary. Mary got excited when she saw the little black cat because it was a familiar capable of sharing senses with Uludola. The cat would accompany Kitase and Mary back to Japan in Uludola's place. They were planning to travel this weekend. The train station was crowded, so Kitase grabbed Mary's hand to avoid getting separated. They needed to choose bento boxes for their high-speed train ride, but Mary was unsure which one to pick given the variety. The young couple discussed their travel plans enthusiastically, which warmed the heart of an elderly lady nearby. After buying their bentos, they headed to the platform. This was Mary's first real-life encounter with a bullet train, which thrilled her even more. She lifted the little black cat to show it the swiftly changing scenery outside the window. After the excitement, they enjoyed their bentos, which were more elaborate than Kitase's usual cooking. They had bought different types, and Kitase encouraged Mary to try some of his. Just as he was about to transfer some food to her bento box, Mary closed her eyes, waiting to be fed. Blushing, Kitase fed her, finding her unintentional flirting unbearable. After eating, Mary felt tired and dozed off against the seat. Kitase found himself reminiscing. He'd been taken in by his grandfather's family when he was in 5th grade, but he could barely remember his life in Tokyo before that, or even what his mother, who had raised him alone, looked like. Perhaps he was more focused on the dreamlike landscapes of his world. After disembarking the bullet train, they took a bus. The area was very different from Tokyo, making Mary feel more at ease. Soon, they arrived in the countryside filled with farmlands. They turned a corner and saw a beautiful snow-capped mountain, a sight Kitase first saw from his grandfather's car, which had startled him with his own voice, long unheard. His grandfather had given him a small piece of chocolate then, just like the one Mary gave him now. They had to walk a bit after getting off the bus, but the fresh rural air was a new experience for Mary. Kitase mentioned he used to walk through such scenes to school every day, which made Mary curious about what he was like as a child. She guessed he probably loved to sleep in, just like now. They encountered a cow that startled the little black cat with its size. Kitase was surprised his grandfather had started raising cattle. The large house at the end of the small road was where Kitase had grown up. His grandfather greeted them warmly at the door, inviting them to sit and rest while he made tea. He complimented Mary's Japanese and eased her nervousness about meeting the family. He seemed to know something, praising Mary's hair as beautiful as a sheep's wool and saying she looked like a fairy, as if from a dream. The couple felt nervous under his knowing gaze. Grandfather explained that Kitase had always loved to sleep, and they often wondered if he was playing in his dreams. He then took the little black cat outside to play, leaving Kitase and Mary to offer incense to his grandmother. The old house had an animated feel to it. Mary, holding the little black cat, followed Kitase around for a tour. As they passed through a hallway, they heard creaking noises, which Mary excitedly guessed must be from a small spirit like in the cartoons. She asked Kitase if they could open a door, but found no spirits inside. Kitase then took her upstairs to see his old room and told her about a secret passage. Mary was thrilled and embarked on a grand adventure to find it, with the little black cat eventually leading her to an attic. The attic was dark, perhaps hiding small spirits. Just then, a red light flashed, exciting and frightening Mary. She sent the little black cat to check, but even the cat was scared. Below, Kitase watched the commotion between Mary and the cat, unable to hold back his laughter. They later joined his grandfather for dinner, enjoying a hot pot with the tastiest local ingredients and a bottle of wine. Seeing Kitase drink so happily, Mary couldn't resist trying some, feeling warmth spread through her throat and stomach immediately. In addition to the meal, Grandpa had prepared a local specialty for them, a beautiful small wallet. It featured traditional embroidery, a craft with a long history, and was hand-stitched one stitch at a time. Mary particularly liked it and quickly promised to cherish it. After their meal, Kitase and Mary washed the dishes together. Seeing that Mary looked a bit tipsy, Kitase suggested they go for a walk to sober up. The countryside night was very quiet and a bit dark due to the lack of streetlights. Mary recited a few spells and surprisingly summoned a light spirit. Both were amazed by what they saw. Mary hadn't expected her summoning to be successful, but this time she had used Japanese, suggesting that different worlds might require different languages for magic. It could also be that she had gradually become accustomed to this place, so the light spirit understood her. Regardless, Kitase was grateful that Mary made such a beautiful scene possible, and Mary was thankful to Kitase for bringing her to such a lovely place. She mentioned that Kitase's grandfather resembled him in having an elusive aura. However, she was puzzled as to why Grandpa kept calling Kitase by the wrong name. Kitase had to reluctantly tell Mary that in fact, the name his grandfather used was his real name because he had initially set up his name incorrectly in another world. Mary's face turned red, realizing she had been calling Kitase by the wrong name all along. As compensation, she started calling out Kitase's true name repeatedly, which made even Kitase blush. Eventually, both returned home with red faces, and Grandpa laughed heartily upon seeing them, joking with the little black cat that they still seemed drunk. After bathing, Mary went out to the courtyard to look at the moon. But for Kitase, Mary was more captivating than the moon. They went to bed early that night. Grandpa thought to bring them a lamp but heard no response from inside. Quietly, he peeked in and saw small points of light flying out from the bed. With a knowing smile, he decided to let them enjoy their time and left them to their dreams.